with me 1 second. All right. I'm going to share the screen and let's begin.
Well, morning, everybody. Thanks for taking the time out to tune in. I think I promised that we're going to just talk about people. It's a continuing theme on this for me, because in amongst all the other things I do, I need to get inside the heads of people and understand people. And a wise old chairman I had when I was younger, much younger and much more ambitious, took me to one side and said, just remember that business is simple, complicated by people. And for all the stuff you do, you have to realize it's all about communicating with people and understanding them. And there are lots of people who talk about these kind of things. As ever, mine is just going to be a practical thing because all of you know what I do here. So that slide will move on to the next one. You know, I'm involved in all things international and local in terms of getting companies to grow and to sort out their issues. So if you can do the next slide, please, Moon. Oh, yeah, that one will do. It's okay. Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to give you some thoughts and ideas onto what type of manager and leader you might be, and certainly how you might want to identify those traits in the people that you're doing it. Now, some of my arguments and observations from what I know are in working with companies in the UK and globally. Globally, it's arguably even more difficult because people don't always, there's more difference in overseas. Moon will probably know in terms of losing face and not wanting to actually say what you want to say, or wanting to hide whether you know what you know, or hiding behind expectations. And I always like that as a challenge. And so when people come on and talk about personality profiling, as some do, and I'm not going to knock it entirely, the likes of Myers-Briggs or DISC profiling, although all of you on here know I call it DISC profiling. Or maybe it didn't, and I've just used another punchline, which is useful. My issue with that is fine, except that as a simple bloke where I live, I just know that my personality might be different when I'm in work to when I'm at home. Your brain works in different ways in different times, and then the other thing that I think sometimes clouds business. So what I'm saying is, on a DISC profiling, my simple logic is, well, yeah, it's very impressive at simplifying something, but actually somebody's asked you the questions, you've given them the answers, and no wonder you recognize yourself when you get the report. So I'm a little bit skeptical about things like that, and also whether your personality stays the same. And to be honest, another thing that is part of this presentation is, in terms of making a business run, or in terms of making a management team improve better, it's not about personalities, it's about the way people will work and what they really want to do. So my other brief story on this is, and I still do it today, a number of years ago, I was brave enough that when I went to see somebody and they handed over a business card which said managing director, I always ask the question as what would you be doing if you weren't called managing director? And that's entirely important. As long as they don't throw you out of the office, it's really relevant, because you get to know what they really like doing and what they really, the way they really think. So it doesn't matter where they are on a DISC profiling scale. It's what they're going to do on a daily basis and what's going to drive them on a daily basis to do it. So here's what happened, and here's what we're going to use for today's session. I'm going to be slightly contradictory in terms of when I started working on the program in Thailand, Enterprise Lab, who I do the work for, introduced me to 3 prospective clients, and they'd been out and met them, and they gave me a profile, and they said, we've got this really good business tool which will summarize the way some of them are working, and some of them are working, and they've highlighted, and it highlights where some of their weaknesses are. And me being from the Black Country with all this experience, I said, well, I don't want to see it yet. But let's see if my observations, my intuition, my questioning makes me come to some sort of conclusions, because we're going to use those anyway. So being slightly contradictory, in a second I'll ask Moon to turn it over. But what we're going to use to summarize this, just so that you've got a visual, is something called the GC index. And it's they started theirs because they said that a personality and profile diagnostic tool don't measure how individuals impact and contribute to a business cycle. And as advisors or experts, or in my case, somebody who wants to grow a business or sort out issues in a company, I thought, well, hang on, I actually want to see if my thoughts on how those individuals impact and contribute to the business cycle work. So let me talk you through, if you can click onto the next slide, Moon, that would be great. So first of all, how this works is that actually, I'm not selling it, but we spend quite a long time doing a GC index profile with individuals and management teams, and it costs money. And I'm not going to, this isn't a plug for me saying, oh, would you like a session? It just focuses on some of the traits. So let's talk through some of these people that might make up a management team in any company, large or small, that you want to do. Now, somebody's come up with this, and on the top half, as you can see, it tends to be imagination based, and on the bottom half, it tends to be more action based, which is absolutely fine. So let me just talk you through, without doing several hours, some of the people you might recognize. So what happened was a company whose summary I'm going to show you in a later slide gave me all the issues they thought they had problems with. Some people in the management team struggled for ideas. Some people struggled to implement it. Nobody knew who was in charge. There were areas within the company who didn't have any ideas of improvements at all, didn't want to be bothered with it, which was fine. Some people who kept suggesting ideas, but they suggested it to the wrong director, so it never got anywhere. And they wanted some ideas on how to grow. And we've done quite a substantial lot of work with the directors of the company and the senior management team to put that right. And this will just summarize what could, you could have a several-hour session on this if you wanted to. So let's just start with some of the people that you see. And in the top left-hand corner are the strategists. Now, you'll recognize these. They're the sort of people who, if you talk to them and have any time with them in a company, they say, well, why are we doing this then? Why am I having to do this? What's the purpose of it? I kind of don't fully understand why I'm doing it. Where does it fit in with the business plan that somebody may even not have told me? So in a mindset, they can see a future. They can, if they know the answers to some of those questions as to why they're doing it and what they're trying to achieve from it, they can encourage people in the team as to why they're doing what they're doing on a daily basis, and can stay pretty motivated for it. So they can see a future, and if you can tie them into a business plan, then they can work out how to make things happen, as long as they know the direction in the first place. So with people with imagination, and I have to say, in my experience, some people do have imagination and some people don't. I had in one of my distributors in the Gulf once, he was a really good sales manager, and I worked with him a lot. And they appointed a director above his head. And when we were driving to a meeting, I asked him about the new guy, and he said, "Well, Steve, Mr. Steve," because that's what I was called over there. He said, "Well, Mr. Steve, I haven't yet worked out what he's thinking, or whether he's even thinking anything at all." And that would have caused big problems in terms of his engagement with doing what he was doing. On the right-hand side, game changers, again, people with imagination. They tend to be individuals who come up with ideas when they're working, when they're walking the dog, whatever they're doing, about the company. And they think them through a little bit, and they can see that they might have potential to transform the company. Not necessarily to change its direction, but possibly to bring new products in, possibly to collaborate with new people that nobody else had thought of. And then, their main driver is somewhere in their brain, most times of the week, or whenever it happens to be, could be while they're watching Halzo in town and they've been inspired by the excitement of the game and the spirit that Halzo in town are playing. They might say, "Hang on a minute, I can think of a different way of doing this. I can think of a better way of us developing this product or service." It could be when they're driving. I'm not going to be scientific. I'm not a scientist, but some people are like that and they can do it. So if we then move down to the bottom left-hand screen, the implementer. Now you'll recognize some of these because they don't tend to have ideas. They don't tend to like change as much. But if somebody says to them, if one of the strategists or the game changer, or as we'll come to it in a minute, the playmaker, not an expression I particularly like, goes to them and says, "Here's what we're trying to do. This is a new product. This is an idea. This is what we're trying to introduce." Then one of their thoughts is, well, what's the outcome? What do we need to achieve and by when? And then they will go away and turn it into reality. Now, in my experience, when you get those involved in the early stages, the game changer or the strategist who would have spoken to them is still very excited. But the strategist and the game changer, after the implementer has started to put the actions into operation and to turn it into production, to turn it into manufacture, to start getting orders, to process those orders, to start getting paid, then by that time, no matter how fast they do it, the strategist and the game changer might have found a new other idea to play with, another idea which has taken over the top of the table on the excitement level and the adrenaline rush level, and will need the strategist to make it happen. In another argument, without upsetting Ian, if you get an old-fashioned salesman who wants to sell everything to anybody at any price at all, then you then need an implementer to make sure you do actually get paid. You can actually make a margin out of it, and they can actually make what the salesman's sold. And then on the bottom right is the polisher. Now, I've had various experiences of the polishers, and these are people who want to make everything that everybody can be proud of. They want to make it the shiniest object. They want to make things better. They want to pursue excellence. They want to improve what everybody does, but they don't tend to think of new ideas themselves. They don't tend to contribute to the strategy other than polishing stuff. So part of their thought process is when they ever see anything is, "Hey, I think we can improve on that," or "I think we're letting ourselves down because the outside impression of what we're doing isn't as good as it might be." Now, I had that with somebody where I appointed an expert who I worked really, really well with. But after a while, I wondered why they let me do all of the work. We'd have a meeting with a board. It would always be me that led it. It would always be me that suggested ideas. And then when we'd finished the board meeting and they got their homework and we got my homework, I kept saying, and she'd contribute to all of those, and it was fine. but then I'd say, so send me your thoughts on what we do next. And she never did. But then when I'd done all the work on it and I ran them by them, she'd say, oh, that's a fantastic idea. But if you just change that, if it happens to when it happens, and we change it to some more positive notes, and we make it a better presentation, or we make that image better. So it changed my view of her from, instead of thinking, good old Steve, he won't mind, he's a bit of a sucker, I'll let him do it, to actually making the external impression really well. And then, because I realize we've only got a few more minutes, in the center of that is the playmaker. Now, the playmaker tends to be the boss, or he needs to be the boss, or he needs to be the head of something or other. He's the ones who are focusing on getting the best from the team, individually, collectively. He knows what the plan for the company is. Maybe he's undoubtedly contributing, and he wants to say who's doing what, how are they making an impact. In football terms, are the players in the right positions? You know, have we got the right people in the teams that are doing it? Is the sales director the best person to be a sales director? Is the financial director meant to be that? So if you start to recognize those traits and recognize those people, then you can put together a very strong team. So just before, actually, we can pull up the final slide now, if you would, Matt. Right, brilliant. Sorry, I was looking at my screen and it hadn't changed. Yep, perfect. Now, back to the other one, you're fine. Sorry. Yeah. So somebody had done a GC index profile with this particular client before I saw it and before I got involved. And I've just realized by saying that it makes me sound as though I might be a smart ass, but just stick with that and just pretend I might be for a while. Some of the problems they were having was that some people had ideas and they weren't going anywhere. So, well, that's a little bit weird, isn't it? So there were a number of ideas in the company, but nothing really ever happened. Then there were some other people who were, let me see which is the best example I can give you. They had lots of polishers, so when anybody was given an idea, most of them wanted to make it the best they could. The game changers bit, the people who, they were looking to develop new products. Some of their products were on a downward curve. They were struggling to get some of the, what could they do next? Competition was battering some of their sales. What could they do next? Well, nobody was there who could think of new ideas, who could be a game changer and who can do it. And they were only getting a certain amount of their strategy implemented because nobody, maybe one or two of them on the management team believed in it, but where they didn't. And on a lot of the strategy I do, you find the weakest link. You'll find people do spiders webs on it. You'll find people create all sorts of diagrams. But if you look in the bottom left-hand side, the individuals who get things done, the people who turn those great ideas, that new branding, that new color, that new product, and that new service, you can have as many of those as you like from the top left and the top right. You can have as much polishing as you like, but if nobody's there to implement it, you're not going to turn it into money and you're not going to turn it into reality. And the center bit, it highlighted why there was no clear MD in the eyes of the people and in the eyes of the board. And we've had to sort that out pretty quickly. It was clear, for example, when some work I did where I asked them to, the people underneath them, the people in the factory, the people in the offices didn't know what their core purpose was, even though there was one. And we couldn't work it out. And we said to the management team, you've decided on a core purpose, haven't you? And they said, yeah. And you've told the people, and they said, yeah. And we said, but they don't believe you. They don't believe you, and that's why they're not acting on it. So we took the management team and we asked them in 2 different languages with their eyes closed to say the core purpose. And it was clear that 3 of them weren't committed to it. So the people who wanted to make it all work, the MD, the chairman, we had to change her role. We had to impose, help her impose her authority on it. And they also had to realize, and she had to do that fairly quickly, because there was no point in implementing new ideas, because the people who brought them in knew they wouldn't get anywhere, and they'd get frustrated and they'd leave. So the idea of looking at the way people behave, their behavior, how they contribute rather than their personalities, is the way you get the best out of their teams. And now if we did it, their individual ideas would change. Some of them would realize it's not their idea to put into, ideas and float them around. And they all get better in their individual roles. And what's happening now in the company, apart from that they've introduced new products and got into new sales areas, is that people know who to get to if they get an idea. And the people who've got the ideas know that actually they'll probably get bored within a few weeks of it. So they need to take it to somebody in the bottom left-hand corner to actually implement it and to turn it into reality. So people behavior and looking at those, and when you're out and about and you're watching and listening to people, I'm not saying like a Dick's profile people suggest that you have to put them into their category, but just think of how they're going to perform and where they contribute, and there they do it. So my final slide is just, you all know me, if you want somebody with a global perspective, if you want somebody who works with management teams and directors and companies old and new in various parts of the world, including in Aylesbury and the Black Country in Worcestershire, then I might just have a different perspective on it, and we might just be able to turn them into really good business. So that's my thoughts into understanding leaders, getting the best out of leaders, not being sidetracked by titles, and making people think what they're best at, and either you train them to do it better or they outsource it to people and get them to do it while still keeping control of their idea in the first place.
Thank you.
I hope that was useful, or I made it up correctly.
Can I stop sharing the screen now?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So any questions?
Very thought-provoking. Thank you, Steve. Very questions, observations more than anything. Steve knows I've been involved with so many companies, and a startup that I've been working with over 12 months. I'm going to take that the next time I go to see them, because that 8%, that little small red dot in the bottom left-hand corner, is their major problem, basically. And there's a real, I think there's a real fear in this organization of launching this product. They've developed it over the last 4 or 5 years now. It's ready for launch. It's been ready for launch for some time, but there's a real, I think there's a real fear there about taking that step. And I think having that presentation, very brief but very informative presentation, almost regurgitated to them. And they're a family business as well, Steve. I think I've told you about this.
Yeah, you did, yeah.
I think would hopefully concentrate their minds, but I think we've all worked in organizations that have that, people with the ideas, people, the polishers, but very few genuine implementers who often see that job, that role as is of less value, when in reality, without them, nothing gets done.
Yeah, I get with the new products, with people who come to me with new products, it's a common trait. They polish it for, they've had the idea, they've started to work on it, they're polishing it forever. And when I first worked with my first glass company, they used to take, they were creating things that nobody had ever seen before. That was my fascination. And they'd say, oh, I've got a new product. I've got this new product. Come down and see it. And I'd pick up something next to it. And they'd say, oh, you can't have that. It's a second. And I've said, but nobody's seen the first. So how do they know the second?
Yeah.
And another one I had with the company whose final slide I shared. When we went in, their sales director didn't want us going in. So we had a bit of a chat, and I took it to one side because of this face saving that I say, particularly answer. I said, do you want to chat about anything before we do the group meeting on that basis? I understand how it works. And she said, blimey, I wasn't expecting that. But yeah, she said, we've had loads of people like you in before. The people never do anything with it. I think I'm wasting my time for the next 2 days. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. And I said, no, I'm glad you said it. I like a challenge. And, see if you still feel the same after 2 days. Because she got tired of suggesting ideas. And then it got mixed in the management fuddle and nothing ever came out. And she's now left, even though we've introduced a few products since. So, yeah, it's a people thing.
Culture and people are absolutely critical. I mean, we've spoken about that before, and I've worked with so many businesses that build on top of very flimsy foundations and wonder why things fail, and are very reticent, sales directors being a classic example, to admit their shortcomings, admit their failings, admit that there are problems that may well have been caused by them. And they often feel that the center of the road is the safest place to remain for their career development, which is often to the detriment of the development of the business. So wrong people in the wrong positions at the wrong time. And how do you approach that, Steve? What's your approach to that scenario?
We had to have some really honest conversations with people individually and collectively. And making them realise that across cultures is an even bigger sadistic challenge, but crikey, it's what I do, so I like it. That was where the bit where it was going to be a big embarrassment with we stopped a couple of meetings where we said, we're just going to have a tea break, go off and have a drink, and we'll get back together. And then when the management team went to walk out, we said, no, we didn't mean you. We need you on your own, so we're not embarrassing you in front of all the other people.
Yeah.
And then that core purpose bit, people could say it, but we weren't interested in the I've got an expression I use on these things. It's not the words that you say, it's the experience you create when you say them. And we used that. We did it as a bit of a gamble. We were in their place. We were a long way from home. They were paying us money, but what the heck? And to get the 3 or 4 people who were obviously in conflict, not openly, but underneath. And we said, okay, tell us why the company's doing what it's doing with your eyes open, and then say it in Thai, and the inference was different. And then we said, right, okay, bear with us. This could be deeply embarrassing. It could be the most embarrassing thing that any English experts have ever done. But while you're all here together, close your eyes and say the core purpose in English or Thai, whichever you prefer, and listen to the other people when they say it. And I was bricking it. I was thinking, why did you think of this idea, Steve? What a stupid thing. But then afterwards, we said, okay, you're all family, you're all the team, you're going to all the board meetings, you're the face of the company, you're determining the energy of the company. How many of you believed what the other people said? And one of them said, well, actually, now you've said that, I never believed in this at all. And
excellent.
And another one said, well, I'm sorry, Malay, but it's your idea and I'm not going along with it. And we said, hallelujah, right. So before we get the others back in, do we want to think with a new one? You know, and so you do have to approach it. You do have to be brave enough and bold enough to approach it. And, you know, you could be saying to that company, you know, you polish it forever, but all it'll do is drain money rather than make you money. And if you don't want to implement it, that's okay. Get somebody in to do it. Outsource your sales, outsource your marketing. But for God's sake, do it. I'm conscious Ian's sorry, Mark, doing his job. Ian was waving his
I
hand.
think Ian
around.
Ian has a question.
Again, I mean, I think it probably won't surprise you that I consider or instinctively, I think I'm in the lower half of your diagram.
Yeah.
And you know, getting things done and improving things, but then getting them done. And I, as you know, I've had a very long corporate career before I started working for myself, and there's plenty of people I've met in my career to date that you know, you just think, what on earth do these people do? They come up with ideas, but they never deliver anything, and that was always a massive frustration for me. And you think, well, okay, I'll grab it by the scruff of the neck, as it were, and get on with it and sort it and do it. So yeah, I definitely reside somewhere in that lower half, and probably more to the implementer than the polisher. But I can see both of those in me. But on that, the diagram that you had, percentages in the different circles, how are you getting to that? Are you doing psychometric testing, or are you doing some other means of establishing that? Or
yeah, good point. No, we did individual. The guy had done individual full GC index tests with him, if you like, and those create behind the result, they create an algorithm or whatever which comes up with percentages. And all we did for that summary one that I've shown you here was to put an average of each of the management team's performance.
So it's personality based and response to a questionnaire based assessment of individuals, yeah?
Yeah, it's an individual assessment it's an individual assessment. You can do it as a group, but it's on the basis that the management board might then go off in different directions or whatever. Yeah, there are some algorithms or whatever behind it. That's how GC Index made the money. But yeah, we put together the averages of the strengths of.
But it also depends.
Sorry.
I was going to say, it also depends on the size of the business, doesn't it? Because in a pretty small business, you need people to wear two hats. You won't have the luxury of carrying somebody that just is a font of ideas but never does anything. If putting that sort of slant on my sort of thinking, but it was a bit extreme perhaps. But yeah, I can see in a big corporate setup, you can afford to have it's the sort of scientist, the boffin or whatever, the ideas person. But and I used to work in one of my first jobs after I left the accountancy profession. I worked in a business that we did have a scientist that worked for us, and he was the product development guy, and he belonged in a university, but he definitely came up with all sorts of ideas and then hand them over to other people. But he was definitely in that game changing slot. But he would have been a real luxury in a small business. So you just can't carry those people. It needs a slightly bigger business. But I mean, other I guess the answer to this is no. But are there in certain positions in a company that you would expect those people to be? So, for instance, the game changer is going to be more like sales or product development or whatever. The playmaker, the MD, I think you already said that. The finance side of things, maybe that's towards implementer and maybe some strategist as well. Are there other sort of pigeonholes that you put different places in?
Well, I think to answer both of your observations, you're right. This isn't necessarily a big company thing. This was the ones I've worked with on this so far, or one where the other guy had already done these, were reasonable sized companies, but the board were family members. Yeah. And it's it's more to illustrate that I think as Anthony said, if you're naturally coming up with ideas and you realize that you're always coming up with ideas, and you both said, for heaven's sake, it is an important person to get somebody to implement them and turn them into reality. Otherwise, oh, I had that idea years ago and I never did anything with it. It's just a realization of your traits and where you're bringing it to it. And then also working out whether for all the adrenaline rush of that new idea and that thing, on a lower side, how much you hate doing the other stuff, you know, you know, because that's fine too, because you're just going to keep ignoring and not wanting to do the stuff you really, really don't want to do, you know, and so get somebody to implement it and then enjoy seeing it, enjoy seeing that idea that you had, which you handed over to someone else appearing in overseas marketing is my buzz, as you guys know, or seeing somebody throw an idea into their team and then making it happen. And similarly, the thrill of the people in the lower side of it, knowing that they made a big difference because, to use, I think, an earlier comment I made, if the tough financial guy who knew all the figures was one of those in the bottom left-hand side hadn't got involved, then they'd have sold loads of product, possibly, but never made any money. You know, the sales guy would have been flying all over the place and doing stuff and never coming back with, you know, and then you'd have got into those battles of, well, another battle we had with the same company was the manufacturing people said, but the salespeople never bring us orders for what we can actually make. And the salespeople said, well, the manufacturing never can't make what we need to sell.
Yeah.
So it is a complicated thing. But if people are aware of it and they're realizing actually, you know, and they put together a team where they do it, you're right. If we change that, if people change their behaviors and put the right people in place, then that 8% would turn into a whole load more sales and profits and a whole load more profitability.
Yeah.
And the people who were coming up with the ideas wouldn't leave because their ideas weren't getting anywhere. And the person in the middle needed to make all those things come together. So, but now it's just to make people realize their business behavior rather than their personality traits.
Yeah.
When I think back to my days in the corporate world, if you wanted me to imagine a dreadful day, it would be a day that I was put in a room with a load of people and blank pieces of paper and brainstorm something, because after 10 minutes I'd be sitting there thinking this is a waste of my time. I've got plenty more I could be doing, sort of thing, getting on with something.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think, I mean, again, when you shift me now into a small business, I'm it, as it were. Okay, it's a different scale, but those behaviours, I mean, clearly I can't be the person that just implements what others come up with suggestion, because there is nobody else to do that. So
it's
it's
you recognize it in clients. You know, you'll recognize it in your clients, or you'll potentially both recognize it in people they meet.
Yeah,
I'm running a program for for Enterprise Lab, and okay, it was very nice, but it was, and I'm not using this as a again, I'm not using this to boast, but I was pleased when the guy said, I want you to run the program and I don't need you to report back to me except occasionally and all the rest of it. And what I knew already was, great, we've worked on this for a couple of years. He's got loads of other ideas. He wants to go off and do those now. And in fact, where I am at the moment is I'm running a program for him, and he's got 3 other things that he's now famous for. You know, he's lost interest in the one I'm doing to a greater extent. And it was no surprise, because even without GC Index, I knew that was what he was like. But that was okay, you know, and people do that.
Ian's point is a really good one. When you run your own business and you go into a client, I think the key word is leadership, and whether you can provide that within the client. and help them to try and blend together all of the skills that they have and don't have within that business. I agree with you. I don't like the word playmaker or conductor or coach, or I think Nigel Kennedy said this week he's having a dispute with Classic FM over Jimi Hendrix. And he said a great orchestra doesn't need a conductor. It knows exactly what it's doing. But in a business sense, it's that, and I think Ian will recognize this, it's having the ability to coordinate all of the talents within a business around a core purpose that they all buy into. I mean, it's branding basically, and the perception that they all buy into it, but then the importance of communicating that to the staff. So I worked with the new hospital in Birmingham when it was being built, and they had this idea of changing the name for some strange reason. And I said, well, why would you want to change the name and spend a fortune on that? Because everybody knows it as the QE, and everybody will forever know it as the QE. And we did a series of focus groups amongst, patient groups, staff, governors, trustees, etc. Everybody with an involvement within the hospital. And the staff said, look, why are we wasting money on renaming a hospital that everybody's going to buy know as the QE, when I have to take my own uniform home and wash it and come back to work on the bus and take any bugs that are picked up that straight into the hospital? Why do you think MRSA is now rife in our hospitals? So if you don't cover off the fundamentals in a business, you can forget about any sort of branding or strategy or clever marketing, because the staff will not buy into it and you will be pulling in several different directions. So when we try to go into a business, and before we even talk about content in a communication sense, you have to try and work out if the framework and the foundations of the business are conducive to success, because you're wasting your time otherwise, and theirs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to stop recording. We have about 15 minutes because this is a connect session. So I would like to hear what everybody's doing, what's up with their business. So I'm just gonna stop recording now, and